Greetings to another video. Today's video is going to be a Q&A. I have rounded up a lot of your questions on my YouTube channel and today I'm just going to answer some. I really like doing Q&As. I love watching Q&As as well, so maybe I should do them more often, maybe like one a month or something. Right, first question is from Arctic Kudama. I did my first 100 miles on Saturday. How do you combat against sore arms and hands? Well done on doing your first 100 miles, that is amazing. Well done to you. And how do you combat against sore arms and hands? I did used to have an issue with that. I used to get a pain in my arm, and the reason that generally you get pain in your arms is because you're putting too much weight on the front of your bike. Basically all your weight is in your arms and it shouldn't be. So a couple of things that I would say to do to combat against this is make sure that your saddle is either at 0 degrees, you can check it with a spirit level on your phone, or -2 degrees. So it should only really be between 0 and -3, actually, -3 degrees. That's what bike fitter Phil Burt, you've seen some videos with him on my channel. But yeah, that's what he recommends, because if your saddle is way too like tilted down like that, you're going to be basically shoved onto the front of your bike and you're going to be putting too much kind of load and weight onto your hands and arms. That should not be the case. It should be kind of an even amount. Also, another thing that you could do is work on your core stability. So that is basically making sure that your stomach and your back and or your core basically is strong enough to hold you on the bike, because I think a lot of people, myself included, don't have very good core stability, so you kind of just flop when you're on the bike, and then when you just kind of flop in, all your weight goes onto your hands and your arms, and it shouldn't. You should be kind of almost holding yourself up with your core, so that's another thing to work on. So I hope that helps. Next question is from Good Rocks. Do you use reflectors when riding in the dark? So I don't have reflectors on my bike, but what I do use, and I've shared this so many times on this channel, sorry, itchy nose, is my ProVis gilet. It is the best gilet. It's called ProVis Switch. It's a reflector on one side, so it's like silver, but then if light goes on, it just glows up in the dark. And then it's like a fluorescent yellow on the other side. So in the day I wear the fluorescent stuff, and then if I'm doing a ride through the night or in the dark, I flip it round and wear the silver side. And yeah, I really like that, especially for overnight stuff, because it keeps you warm and it's also completely reflective, so I really like that. So that's definitely one. I'll leave a link to that if you're interested to it below. But yeah, I really like ProVis stuff. Al says, fantastic numbers. How long did it take you to get from 200 to 279 watts? I think this was relating to a video about my FTP, so that's functional threshold power, and the watts that you can hold over a 20-minute effort. Well, it's 95% of that 20-minute effort, which is your FTP. So, how did I get from 200 to 279? I don't ever remember actually having a 200 watt like FTP, because, let me explain, my FTP is pretty much, or my 20-minute effort should I say, has always been pretty much around 279 for all the time that I've been cycling. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the reason that it stayed the same and not kind of increased, not because I'm lazy and I couldn't be arsed to train, it is because my weight has dropped. So even though my numbers have stayed the same, my weight has just completely dropped, which means that my watts per kilo has increased, and I guess watts per kilo is what cycling is, the kind of the metric that you want to improve. So yeah, I mean, if you're wanting to improve yours, just train with a power meter, do different intervals. It depends what you're training for. If you want to be fast at sprints, you need to train one way. If you want to be fast at endurance, you need to train that way. It depends what your actual aim is, because a lot of it is, there's no point like just trying to, I guess you can do, that's what I used to do, is just, you kind of want to have the goal, rather than just increasing numbers, you want to actually train to the thing that you enjoy doing on the bike. Whereas for me, I always loved climbing, so for me, my FTP was just almost just like a smash up my local climb, which is Duff Stones, which I loved anyway, so train for what you want, is what I would say. Next question is from Roman Rabaj. Hi Katie, how tall are you? Will you suggest bike with disc or rim brake? So I am 5'9", 5'10", I would say more 5'9", I think. And bike with disc or rim. I'm gonna do a separate video on this. This is gonna be a whole video on the kind of the pros and cons of both, because there are pros and cons to both. It depends. It completely depends on the type of bike that you're riding, the terrain that you're riding on, where you live, and what your personal preference is. So I will do a separate video on that. I've got bikes with both. I like both for different reasons. Also as well, I think it's going to come to a point where we can't even choose rim brake bikes anymore, sadly. I do like rim brake bikes, but when I've been looking at different frames and bikes for 2019, like there's just hardly any with rim brakes, so I thought that's a shame. So I think actually the choice is going to be taken out of our hands very soon, which I don't really like. So next question is from Moose Needs. How easy do you find train travel with the bike? Is pre-booking essential or does it vary? Yeah, it does vary. I guess a rule of thumb in the UK is you should... Sorry, my hair's making my face all itchy. It's just, I don't know why, it's just all in my face. Ugh. Back to train travel. Yeah, you generally have to pre-book, so you would just book your ticket and then say that you've got a bike, because most trains have only got space for 2 bikes, which is just ridiculous. Sometimes I have done it and not pre-booked and managed to get a space. Sometimes, like, some of my friends have just been like turned away, which is a bit crappy. And I do feel like, personally, this is just my opinion, that there needs to be more space on trains for bikes, because then it would encourage more people to travel with a bike rather than driving cars. So yeah, it could be a lot better. So yeah, you do have to pre-book generally. And then the last question for this very quick Q&A is, Mick Clayton said, I thought your job was as a reporter, charity shop and vlogging are amazing, but how do you earn a living? Right, this is another thing that I get asked about a lot. So yeah, I was a reporter, a journalist for about pretty much 10 years. And then I left that job last year because I wanted to dedicate more time to YouTube, to cycling. And so I quit that job because the hours were just kind of all over the place. And that is just the life of a journalist. You work a lot of hours, and not a lot of hours, you know, I mean, you work hours that are kind of all over the place. So I was doing really early mornings, really late nights, weekends. I couldn't really get a schedule into like sorting my lovely Audax and races and stuff like that out, so I just quit. I then got a job as, I don't work in a charity shop, I work for a charity, it's a vegan charity. So I am their media officer, like, and campaigns person, which is perfect, and that's part-time. And then the rest of the time is doing YouTube. So how do I make money? I make money from the part-time job, and I also make money from YouTube. So the adverts that you see before a video, I make a very, very tiny little percentage of, I don't know, it's like Google AdSense basically. It's not like per video. So say, I'm not explaining this very well. Basically you get like, I don't know how many it works out to, but it's not very much for how many views. You have to get a lot of views before you're making money. I think I was probably on YouTube maybe three or 4 years before I actually made any money from it, maybe 3.5. And I think that first one was like £100 or something. So I couldn't live off what I'm getting off YouTube. And then also the other way that I make money is from working with brands. So that's not a huge thing at the minute. I'm getting like odd bits here and there. And the reason for that is because I will only work with brands that I absolutely love and that I think are going to bring value to you. You'll never see me promote a brand on my channel that I don't wholeheartedly really like and already use. So yes. So I think that's pretty much it. If you want to ask some more questions, ones that I've not answered, put them in the comments and I'll do another Q&A maybe next month or something. So yeah, I'll come back to this video then and I'll look at all your questions and then do a video from that. I've also got a separate, it's like a Q&A part 2 on my Patreon. Oh yeah, that's also how I make a little bit of money. Not a lot, I make a tiny little bit of money from Patreon, from people like my viewers who support me financially, and that can be like $2, $5 or $10. So yeah, if you want to go and have a quick check over there, feel free. So I'm going to do another Q&A from the questions that my patrons have asked of me there. So yeah, that is it for this Q&A, and I'll see you next video.